I haven't done this before, but before I should start my talk, piece of music I heard while I was researching, which I must recommend, words by Sir Terry Pratchett, sung by Steel Eye Span, We Shall Wear Midnight. It's one of the most beautiful songs I think I've ever heard, and I think he wrote it shortly before his death. So I'm going to recommend that before I start my my talk. I've called my talk The Christmas Star. I've got quite a bit of information, in fact a lot of information in this talk, but I've tried to make it not too heavy, and I've got a suggested solution for what the Christmas star may have been. We've got the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn coming up soon, and it's already been christened the Christmas star, or the Star of Bethlehem. Because Ray Emery is giving a talk tonight on the Star of Bethlehem, and I'm doing a different talk, I decided to call mine the Christmas Star. But I found out today the word Christmas only entered the English language in 1038 AD, so a bit late. So certainly anybody around at the time wouldn't have been saying, have you seen the Christmas star? And of course there's a picture of the forthcoming grand conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. There's a lovely picture which I just wanted to put in before I start speaking properly. Keithley Astronomical Society have put that on the internet, and I just think it's such a lovely picture that I'm going to include it in my talk. This book is the book that I've used most for researching it, as well as the Bible, obviously. The Star of Bethlehem by Mark Kidger, who incidentally did at one time when he was writing this book in 2006 was working at the observatory in Tenerife, but I think he holds a university post now somewhere. He says the Star of Bethlehem is perhaps the greatest of all astronomical mysteries. It is certainly the most enduring and one of the hardest to solve. It remains a fascinating story. Thought you might like a couple of cartoons before I get serious. That's three mafia guys, the Three Wise Men. My favourite cartoon I found was this one, Star of Bethlehem, written the police. Hello police, this is the Star of Bethlehem. I think I'm being followed by these three guys and it's really freaking me out. I thought you might like that. Okay, 3 questions to answer. Was there a Christmas star? What was it? And was it a one-off event? And I'm going to suggest later on that it was not a one-off event. It was a series of events. And I'll come on to that later. Christmas star, you often get it on the top of Christmas trees. There's a nice picture of one here, associated with Father Christmas. This Father Christmas with a child precariously balanced on the top of somebody's roof. I don't think that would be in accord with the Health and Safety Act, but anyway, that's another picture of it. And of course, it's in Christmas carols. Star of Wonder, Star of Night, guide us to thy perfect light. There's also a plant called the Star of Bethlehem, and David Sellers and I know that we discussed this in our Latin class last week, because Orni Thogolum umbellatum does not translate as the Star of Bethlehem, so I don't know how it's got that name, but there is a star. Sorry, a flower, I do apologise. Right. This is a representation of the 3 kings, which is in the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Very strangely dressed, and I shall explain why later on. Normally they're shown riding camels, as you see from a Christmas card here on the right. It's also a film, various Christmas films that feature the Christmas star. I must say, first of all, nativity plays tend to do a lot of harm, because what they tend to do is conflate events that took place over a period of anything up to 2 years into a single dramatic piece. So on there you'll see you've got Mary and Joseph, the baby, the shepherds with a lamb, the angels, the Christmas star at the top, some other animals, some strange looking people on the left who are supposed to be the 3 wise men. One of them looks like he's got a green spacesuit on. It's pretty clear that the shepherds and the wise men did not appear at the same time, or even when Jesus was a baby. This is the words from the Bible, and bear in mind the Christmas star and the 3 wise men only appear in one gospel, Matthew's Gospel, which was written approximately 50 years after Jesus had been around. And I'm quoting from it. It says, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" Notice that, the tense. It's not who is being born or about to be born. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we've seen his star in the east and have come to worship him.
Wow, yeah.
Just a couple of biblical prophecies. I'm not going to talk about the Bible all the time, but just to quote them. The famous one about the star, Book of Numbers in the Old Testament, says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth out of Jacob, and a scepter shall arise out of Israel." That's not the only, but one of the few references to an actual star as a prophecy. And of course, the prophecy that says, "O you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, from you shall come a ruler who will govern my people." Okay, let's get some facts in. Herod the Great, who was the king that the wise men actually came to see, died in 4 BC. So we're looking at an astronomical event on or about or before 4 BC. Jesus was born somewhere between 6 and 4 BC, and some scholars think it's more than probable he was born in 5 BC in March or April. Highly unlikely he was born in December, because December in Palestine is very cold, and shepherds would not be likely to be out in the fields with their sheep in December. So it's likely to be more March or April. The star, which I'm going to describe in a minute, signified kingship. Some people think it's a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is the planet connected with royalty and kingship, and Saturn is closely associated with the Jewish people. The wise men said they'd seen the star in the east, but why had King Herod apparently not noticed it? Okay, was it a supernova? Well, some people think that's a speculation. Halley's Comet, there was an appearance of Halley's Comet in 12 BC. That's a little bit too early. A meteor, I'll say more about this later, but that's probably too brief to be really considered. Was it a conjunction of the planets Jupiter and Saturn? There was certainly one in 7 BC, and there was also a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus, one in 3 BC and one in 2 BC. That might seem a bit late to be considered, the last one, but we'll come to it in a minute. As well as the Gospel of Matthew, there is a book that didn't make it into the New Testament called the Proto-Evangelium of James. And in that it describes the star. The wise men say, "We saw an indescribably great star shine among the other stars and dim them so they no longer shone." And at the beginning of the 2nd century, a man called Ignatius of Antioch, who unfortunately ended up being thrown to the lions, you can see him being thrown to the lions there, he said its light was unspeakable and its novelty caused wonder. So, what was it? Before we just consider the star, let's just quickly consider the 3 wise men. The 3 wise men are described as bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But how do we know there were 3 of them? In some traditions, religious traditions, Christian traditions, there's 2 wise men. In others, there's 4, and in others, there's 12. They certainly bought expensive gifts, so there were people of status. Whether they were kings or not, they became kings over time, and so we sing the Christmas carol, "We 3 kings of Orient are." They obviously had no problems getting to see Herod. The word that's used in the New Testament, the Greek word is magoi, which translates into English as magi. Wise men, some Bible translations, modern ones, have them as astrologers. It says, "We've seen his star in the east," which says that they'd obviously done some astronomical observations. I thought you might like this. What happens if the 3 wise men were actually women? On the left saying they're going to use sat-nav, and on the right bringing practical gifts, not gold, frankincense and myrrh, baby wipes, chocolate and wine. Right, let's look at the star now. There are 4 weak options and 5 strong options for what it was. It has been suggested it could be Venus, and somebody said that's quite absurd when we consider it critically, because Venus appears several times during the year. Wise men would know about Venus and wouldn't mistake it for something else. And to Patrick Moore's famous comment, he said, if the wise men were fooled by Venus, they could not have been very wise. Could it have been a comet? Halley's Comet appeared in 12 BC. Unfortunately, comets are bad news, not good news in the ancient world. So you wouldn't really expect that to be bringing good news. Could it be a meteor shower or a storm? Meteor showers, you have some throughout the year, quite a few throughout the year, the Geminids, the Leonids, etc. A meteor storm is a short-lived event where you actually get, instead of like one shooting star in a minute, you get about 10 or more shooting stars in a minute, usually very short-lived, and the date doesn't fit. There was a big meteor storm in America in, I think it was in 1986, which people took photographs of it, and you had one meteor chasing another across the sky. So they were going in the right direction, I think, east to west, but trouble was, you know, a few hours later it all finished, so that really isn't to be taken seriously. An occultation by the moon. An occultation is where a planet, usually a planet, but not necessarily, is behind the moon, and then it comes out from behind the moon, and it's very spectacular. But again, I put date is wrong. I'm going to qualify that in a minute. Visibility, would you see it at the right times, and would it be anything worth special, worth mentioning? Okay, the 5 strong options now. A supernova, an all-star exploding, as we expect Betelgeuse to do sometime in the future. The idea that it was a supernova is normally related to Kepler, but in actual fact it wasn't Kepler. It was a modern astronomer who, I think I might be wrong, there was one modern astronomer called Frank Tipler, I think his name, who said, oh, maybe it was a supernova, a dying star, and that certainly would be spectacular. There's a story that Arthur C. Clarke wrote in 1956 called The Star, which is about an astronomer who's also a Jesuit priest, investigating a supernova remnant, like the Crab Nebula is a supernova remnant. And in the story, I haven't read the story, he decides this particular supernova remnant is actually the Star of Bethlehem. So that's one idea. Could it have been a conjunction either of Jupiter and Saturn, which Kepler supposed it might be, which he observed the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, which I think was in 1623, or even a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus. And I mentioned Regulus, and I'm going to explain why I've mentioned Regulus, the star Regulus, because that's quite important. I'll explain why in a minute. Could it have just been a miracle, a miraculous event? Alan Chapman told me a few years ago, I bought Alan Chapman the book I've mentioned, Mark Kidger's book on the Star of Bethlehem, as a Christmas present, and we discussed it. And Alan Chapman said, as a Christian, he has no problem in saying it's a miracle. It doesn't need an explanation. It's a miracle. Can't explain it. If you're a skeptic, you could say it didn't happen. It's a pious fiction. And certainly, in favour of that one, and I'm not saying I believe this, but Matthew's Gospel is the only Gospel to mention a Christmas star. It was written about 50 years after the events it describes. And in the ancient world, a star appearing was a sign that something important was going to happen. In Jewish tradition, the patriarch Abraham, there's a story that a star appeared to announce his birth, and I think the same with Moses and some of the Roman emperors. I don't subscribe to the fact it was a pious fiction, but I'll come back to that in a minute. Or was it a nova? And I've put bingo, because I'm going to argue in a minute it probably was a nova, but I'll explain that further towards the end of the talk. Okay. Sorry, it's not a very good picture of a supernova. That's the best I could do. Okay. Was it Halley's Comet or a comet? This is a famous painting which is in Padua at the chapel on the right by the famous painter Giotto, who lived from, I think it was 1266 to 1330 something. He observed Halley's Comet in 1301, I think it was, And there was another comet appeared in 1304. So he decided, yeah, Christmas star, Halley's Comet. So he stuck it in the painting. As you can see, it's over the stable. The famous comet, of course, is the Bayeux Tapestry, which Maggie and I went to see 2 years ago. That's it on the left, with poor old Harold shaking away on his throne on the right at the bottom, and there's a close-up of Halley's Comet, or Halley's Comet if you prefer, on the right. You can see the reaction of all the people on the left, the courtiers at King Harold's court. And as Shakespeare said, when beggars die, there are no comets seen, but heavens blaze forth the death of princes. In other words, comets in the ancient world were bad news, not good news, and you wouldn't really associate a comet for the birth of somebody like the coming Messiah. Meteor shower, that's a picture, I think, of the Leonid shower, but I'm not sure if it is. Okay, yeah, a lot of stars, except that Matthew's Gospel says a star, and in the Greek it says a star, not several stars. Here's a picture of a planetary conjunction. Somebody happened to have a camera, I think it was that camera that we saw earlier. They happened to take a picture of it above the manger. No, it's a modern photograph, obviously. But even against the background of all those stars, a planetary conjunction is still quite a sight. But whether that was it or not, we don't know. There was a planetary conjunction in 3 BCE, or BC if you prefer, Venus and Jupiter, and they were very near the star Regulus. There's Regulus at the tip of the front paws of front feet rather of Leo the lion. Don't know why Leo the lion seems to have lost his front legs there, but never mind. Regulus is a royal star. It actually was at one time thought to be the king of all the stars. So Regulus fits, king, Regulus, Jupiter, kingship, it all fits. And there was another one a year later, in June 2 BC, this Jupiter and Venus. But whether that was too late, we don't know. However, if the wise men took 2 years to get to Jerusalem, it's a possible thing for consideration. Or was it just a miracle, as you get on Christmas cards? Okay. Or I like this one. Did it not happen? Thought you might like this cartoon of the 3 very wise men who decide not to bother going to Jerusalem. Last year, the Sky at Night programme on BBC did a programme about the Star of Bethlehem. I don't remember what conclusion they came to, but this is one of the stills, I believe, from the programme. It shows a supernova, a comet, a meteor, planetary conjunction. I think he'd have had all of those in the sky at the same time. I think the wise men would have been confused. That's probably why they're facing in different directions. Okay, just some additional information. The Bible record says that the star guided the wise men from the east to Jerusalem, and then a further 6 miles from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. It also says that it stood above a particular house in Bethlehem. Just to remind people that if you read Luke's Gospel, you've got Jesus as a baby in the manger and you've got the shepherds. In Matthew's Gospel, it describes Jesus as a child in a house in Bethlehem, where you've got the wise men coming with a star. So how long was the star in the sky then? If you take it that the wise men came from Babylon, I'm going to suggest they came from further east, but if they came from Babylon to Jerusalem, if you travel 2 miles an hour and you travel 8 hours a day, because you don't want to be crossing the desert in the afternoon, so you start early morning, say do 8 hours a day, 2 miles an hour on a camel, it's 550 miles from Babylon to Jerusalem. So it'll take at least a month and a half or even longer. Don't forget, they've observed the star, they've decided it's significant, they have to prepare for the journey, they set off and they have traveling time, okay? How old was Jesus when they arrived? Well, if you read Matthew's Gospel, chapter 2, it says that Herod subsequently ordered all male children of 2 years old or under to be killed. So Jesus could have been anything between being a baby to being 2 years old. That's just a map to show if they did start from Babylon, they wouldn't have gone just directly from east to west. They would have gone the roundabout route. They would have shadowed the river Euphrates, and then they would have gone past Syria, I think go through some mountains there, and then down into Israel, Palestine, down to Jerusalem. And just to show you that Jerusalem to Bethlehem is about 6 miles distant. Okay, I'm not time to discuss it now, but Mark Kidger explains that when they left Babylon, if that is the case, the star would have been in the east, as it says in the Bible. By the time they get round to Jerusalem, the star would have moved. It would be in the south. I'm not going to go into that now because I haven't enough time. Okay, the wise men. The Venerable Bede, who I've mentioned before, he said mystically the three magi signify the three parts of the world, Asia, Africa and Europe. So there is a theory or an idea that there were three wise men and they came from three entirely different places. One of them is normally shown as being dark-skinned Africa, another one from Asia, as I've already said, and another one from Europe. It's more than likely it's one of the two possibilities that they came from Babylon or from Persia. If they came from Babylon, you remember the Jews were exiled in Babylon in the Old Testament, so the Babylonians, astronomers, certainly knew about prophecies about the Jewish Messiah. At least by 2000 BC, we know the Babylonians had a tradition of studying astronomy, and they observed the stars, the planets, eclipses, comets, occultations, etc. The Persians, on the other hand, as I've put at the bottom, there was not a great tradition of Persian astronomy, but Mark Kidger believes they were Persians. There's a number of reasons why they might have been Persians. There would most likely have been a religion, Zoroastrianism, which is a very similar belief system to what the Jews believed in the Old Testament. Marco Polo, who went exploring about 1271 to 1290, actually came to a village in Persia where the people said, oh, this is we're the village where the wise men came from. I think they were into the tourist trade even in the 13th century. But the most telling argument is a picture which I've already shown, which I'll show again in a minute, shows the wise men wearing Persian clothes. That's on the wall of the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Those are Persian clothes, the Phrygian cap, a belt, covered arms, trousers. Those are all Persian clothes. And when the Persians were on the rampage in 614 AD, they went to Bethlehem, and when they saw that in the church, they said, oh, whatever you do, don't damage this, because this shows our forebears coming as three wise men to visit Jesus. Okay, bringing it all to a head. The star should satisfy these criteria. First of all, the explanation must be compatible with the probable date of the Nativity, which I said is more than likely about 5 BC. It must be a singular, special or spectacular event. These aren't my words, by the way, so don't think I made this up. But it must be a rare event. It must have had a special meaning for the Magi. Must have occurred in the East, because it says that, and it must have endured for some time. Mark Kidger came to the conclusion that all those separate individual explanations I said earlier, they fail to clear the final hurdle, because no one can locate an astronomical event or a phenomenon recorded in ancient documents so spectacular on its own that it was clearly the star. But, and I'm going to draw to a conclusion in a minute, he said, supposing it wasn't one event, it was a combination. And this is the only bit I want you to stay awake for. The astronomers, the Babylonian astronomers, were also astrologers. So just bear this in mind before I show you the penultimate almost slide. Jupiter as a planet is a royal and benevolent planet, and it usually denotes kingship. So if you see Jupiter in a conjunction, that means a great ruler is coming. Saturn's normally a malign planet, but it also, nothing to do with this, I'm not being anti-Semitic, it's also a planet associated with the Jewish people. Saturday is named after Saturn, and Sabbath, which is Saturday. So if they saw Jupiter and Saturn together, it means a Jewish Messiah would arise. And if you saw Mars as well, you'd have the planet of war. So add it all up astrologically. So a Jewish Messiah, symbolized by Saturn, Jupiter, would challenge the Roman Empire, Saturn as a malign planet seen there with a sword. Okay, so it all fits. And if it was in the constellation of Pisces, that's the constellation also associated with the Jewish people. So to finish off, nearly finishing off, Mark Kidger suggests 4 signs. In 7 BC, in May, there was a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces. Triple conjunction, by the way, is it's 3 stages. You get a conjunction, they separate, the Jupiter and Saturn come back together, separate, come back together. It happens 3 times. That's why it's a triple conjunction. And that was closely followed by an occultation of Jupiter by the moon. That all fits. A year later, in February 6 BC, there was a massing of planets, not a conjunction. 3 planets, Jupiter, Saturn and Mars, and that was in the constellation of Pisces. In this case, spot on. A year later, in February 5 BC, pairing of Jupiter and the moon, and that was slightly to the east of a pairing of Mars and Saturn. And then even better, it was followed by 2 occultations of Jupiter by the moon. And then in February, March 5 BC, a nova was spotted. We know from records that the Chinese observed that nova, a new star, and hey, it was visible for more than 70 days. Enough time for the wise men to travel from wherever they came from to Jerusalem, and the star was still visible, although it would have been fading by the time they got to Bethlehem. So Mark Kidger says, who can say that such a rare combination of events, several conjunctions and a bright nova blazing brightly across the heavens in the east, right at the moment of Jesus's birth, was not indeed miraculous? So, was that series the explanation of the Star of Bethlehem? Or was it just a miracle? Or did it not happen at all? We're coming up to a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, which is next week, December the 21st. They will be at their closest since 1623, yeah. They will only be apart by 1/10 of a degree. Fantastic. Okay, that's already, oh, this is just a picture of somebody went up in a spaceship and took this picture in space. That just shows the positions of the Earth, the Sun, Jupiter and Saturn. Sun, if you notice, has been vastly reduced in size, and it's wrongly showing the orbits as being circular, not elliptical. But that's already been hailed as the Christmas star, the coming conjunction. So maybe we can end up on a helpful note that the end of a not very good year, perhaps this is a hopeful sign. So I just want to say to you all, whatever the Christmas star was, if indeed there was one, may the joy and peace of Christmas be with you all this season and into 2021. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much. The end.
Right, thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
David.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll take any questions.
We have a question.
Yeah,
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
You showed that picture of the 3 kings, right?
Yeah.
And there was the name of the 3 kings there.
Yes.
How did you find that out? That isn't the
Funny enough, I can't remember. It's in the book. Those are the commonly accepted names, which came obviously well after the event. But I can't find I don't like to find the reference in the book. There are other names that they've been given. Those are the ones by which they're more commonly known. Hang on, if you got 2 seconds, I think I can find it. Wait a minute. 3 kings. Just accept it for me for the moment till I find it. If somebody else wants to ask me. Basically, those are the names that are commonly given to them. Yeah, here we are. In nativity plays and in popular culture, they're known as Melchior, Balthazar, and Gaspar, not Caspar, Gaspar with a G. I can't find it. It does suggest, if you look it up on the internet, that there are other names in other cultures that people have given them. Those are the three accepted names, and also over a period of time, as I mentioned, they managed to transmute themselves from being wise men into being kings. And I don't know where that comes from. Again, that's tradition. You know, why should there be kings? I mean, you know, kings don't usually say, "Oh, what are you going to do? I'm going to go off on an astronomical journey," you know. But that's tradition, really. Hope that's answered it. Sorry if it, I hope it has.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yes, can I ask a question? It struck me, David, that as you were telling that story, well-known story, but the star was said to be in the east, and the wise men came from the east.
Yes.
So if they were traveling from perhaps Babylon,
Yes.
towards the star that was in the sky, they would have been traveling west. If they were coming from the east,
Yes.
they would have been traveling west.
Mm.
So that the star would have been in the west that they were moving towards.
Yes.
So if the star was in the east, wouldn't they be traveling
Yes.
from the west towards the east, you know, more like Egypt towards
Yeah, you're dead right. And Mark Kidd just spent some time. I can't remember his exact explanation of it, but I think he has it that, you know, that if you can accept that the star was actually sort of maybe slightly behind them. Yeah, it is a problem. I honestly can't remember his explanation. He does suggest an explanation, and for that. Of course, if you take the option some people do, and Alan Chapman certainly does, of saying, well, it was a miracle and there's no real problem which direction it was. It can go before them, it can go anywhere you like. But like you say, no, that is a difficulty.
I suppose with the rotation of the Earth, it's going to be in the east and the west at some point, isn't it?
Yes. Well, it says he explains that over the course of time with the movement of stars, and he explains it in the book, that by the time they reached Jerusalem, it actually moved to the south. It was in the south. But you have that problem of where it says that when they got to Bethlehem, it was actually over the house where you know, where they lived. And you think, how the hell do you manage that? You know, a comet can hover over a house, but a star, it's a bit odd. And of course, you've got the idea that it's, if you like, a moving star, which again is a slight problem, you know.
Surely over the course of any night, it would move from east to west.
Yes,
So
yes.
in one day, it will be in both directions. So I'm not sure what the meaning of saying it was a star in the east.
Yes, yes. I wonder if that, in actual fact, if you read it in the original Greek, which I have to tell you, I think I have done because I know New Testament Greek. I think it was that they observed the star in the east. In other words, they were in the east when they saw the star, rather than telling you about the star itself, if that makes sense. Yeah, that they were in the east and they observed it in the east, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the star itself was permanently in the east. And if you take that on board, then there isn't really a problem.
Is there any clue about the time of day when they observed it?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Mark Kidge is very good. I mean, he's given talks and stuff on it, and he does explain it. But you do wonder whether it's one of these ideas that you think the explanations get more and more convoluted and more complicated. Maybe it's better just to keep your head down and just send Christmas cards and don't ask too many questions about it.
Okay. I don't know if anyone else got any questions. take a 10-minute stretch, quick break.